Youth in America face numerous challenges when they are not given or provided with the necessary resources to matriculate and or transition to adulthood and society. They are more likely to engage in risky behaviors such as drug use, alcohol consumption, truancy, educational apathy, and violence. In addition, at-risk youth may experience high levels of stress due to neglect and abuse. This is the story of a boy named Joseph, who is now 16 years old, but at 4 years old, he was found by local police abandoned in an apartment. Joseph's mother was discovered to have experienced a drug overdose and subsequently died. The Department of Child Protection and Permanency took custody of little Joseph and placed him in a home where he stayed for an entire year. At 5 years old, he was removed from that home and placed in another home. At 6 years old, he was again placed in another home, and at 8 years old, he continued to be shuffled around from home to home. Now, by the time Joseph was 16 years old, he had already experimented with drugs, alcohol. He became a runaway more than 6 times. He dropped out of school and was arrested numerous times for stealing. Hi, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Peterson Dennis, and I want to talk about child abuse and or neglect. What happens to kids during childhood shapes who they become as adults. Sexual child abuse is a type of maltreatment, violation, and exploitation which includes contact for sexual purposes, molestation, statutory rape, prostitution, pornography, exposure, incest, or other sexual exploitative activities. 14.5 out of 1,000 African Americans experience abuse and or neglect. 8 out of 1,000 Latino children experienced abuse and or neglect. The child abuse rate is highest among African American children between 2 to 5 years of age, with about 167,000 cases reported in 2016. History documents that child maltreatment has existed since the beginning of civilization. Unfortunately, it is only in most recent years that the healthcare, mental health, and social services community has taken abuse and neglect of young people seriously. In fact, prior to the 1960s, many sectors of our society failed even to acknowledge its existence. Institutional, legislative laws tethered with social work and the medical field engaged in dialogue and action to change the way society viewed child neglect and abuse. One of these institutions which played a vital role in recognizing this issue was the SPCC. Created in 1874 and organized in New York City, the organization rapidly grew and now is called the American Humane Association. This association, through its role in social advocacy, helped to create language that would better identify child abuse and neglect with the intent of preventing non-accidental injuries inflicted by adults onto children. Today, there are several agencies created to combat injustices that children endure. Agencies such as Child Protective Services, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children and Families of the Children's Bureau. Though studies of the causes and consequences of child neglect and/or abuse have generated an influx of interest, the discussions swirling around the causes and consequences seem to have ambiguous results. There have been attempts by organizations and professionals to create a mechanism for studying theoretical models which will help us understand the consequences of child maltreatment. In regards to consequences of child maltreatment, Wyndham said, contextual factors need much more study. Furthermore, these contextual factors need to be studied in combination to understand both the causes and consequences of maltreatment. With newer models that have been introduced to medical professionals and in the social work arena, neurological considerations have been at the cutting edge of understanding child maltreatment. Wyndham states that our critical changes in the central nervous system becomes the ground zero of understanding child maltreatment. She suggests that more research be done in the area of one's genes and environmental realities and how, when combined, may affect one's immune system. Though studies are ongoing, there have been progress in understanding consequences of early stress and maltreatment. Neglect and child abuse lead to numerous developmental and behavioral issues such as psychological and emotional problems, which can lead to aggression, violence, anger, trauma, truancy, depression, anxiety, drug abuse, suicide, and sexual promiscuity. Agencies such as DHHS and OJJDP provide resources to assist youth and provide resources to help young people heal, cope, and avoid the pitfalls due to an abusive past. The OJJDP provides funds to states that follow certain federal protections for juveniles. This is an agency which provides guidance and resources to respond to criminalization and victimization of youth. The OJJDP helps support communities with the implementation of programs that are geared to focus on prevention. Other agencies such as CASA are being utilized to support youth who have experienced abuse and neglect through professionals and/or resources, which provides care and plethora of other needs that youth cannot do without. Researchers must have access to reporting logs, data collected, and access to adults and children who have been exposed to experiences of child abuse and neglect. Now, when retrieving and/or gathering information pertaining to children who have experienced abuse and/or neglect, confidentiality becomes a topic of discussion and concern. In particular, child abuse mandatory reporting laws make researchers fearful of losing participants because of the impact of reporting. Here are codes of ethics followed by professionals, social workers, which protects clients and professionals. However, these are codes that also can limit scientific study of the issue due to confidentiality laws. 1.07 Privacy and confidentiality. Social workers should respect clients' right to privacy. Social workers should not solicit private information from or about clients except for compelling professional reasons. Once private information is shared, standards of confidentiality apply. B. Social workers may disclose confidential information when appropriate with valid consent from the client or a person legally authorized to consent on behalf of a client. H. Social workers should not disclose confidential information to third-party players unless clients have authorized such disclosure. Child abuse and neglect is certainly a social problem, which still to this day is plaguing our society. The dignity and worth of people does not exclude young people. In fact, social justice is intended to be the blowhorn announcing to the world that the vulnerable have voices, the voiceless have rights, and the impoverished are in need of basic human decencies and basic needs. When we engage this issue in the micro arena, we are meeting with youth, empathizing with youth, engaging mothers and or dads who care in need of support and guidance, and we are committing our time and effort to become constant in a child's life. In the meso arena, we are engaged in the school with school counselors, teachers, religious institutions, community centers, medical professionals, and in many cases, Department of Protective and Permanency, courts, caseworkers, and mental health facilities. In the macro arena, we communicate with men and women who create legislation that will put a real face to the issue of child maltreatment. Financial resources are then released to states and communities that not only fund agencies, but also resources are made available for scientific research, which is necessary to better understand the causes of the issues of abuse, neglect, and resources that are also used to record and collect data. This concludes this presentation of my social problem, child abuse and or neglect, youth at risk. Thank you.